Hey guys, the video you are about to watch is a retrospective on the Friday the 13th franchise that I'm recording as sort of a podcast, but I'm going to be putting it up on YouTube in video form. Now, this is a franchise I've actually talked about multiple times on my YouTube channel. I've reviewed each film individually, and I actually did do a retrospective years ago, but that was just a video of me talking by myself, but this time I'm joined by some special guests. First is my friend John, who was in the Halloween retrospective with me.
Hey guys, how's it going?
And my friend Jeremy.
Hello, everyone.
Now, before we get on to each individual film, what do you guys think of the Friday the 13th series as a whole? How do you think the series holds up as a whole or works as a whole?
I mean, it's definitely very enjoyable to watch. I mean, none of them are perfect movies by any means, but they definitely provide a fun, good time, you know. They're harmless, good, gory fun, you know.
Yeah, I agree the same thing too, but at the same time, I enjoy watch these once in a while because they're just fun, guilty pleasures, just to, have a good time with friends and stuff.
And you see, for me, Friday the 13th is pretty much the quintessential slasher series. It's where all the cliches that you think of when you think of slasher films came from. And admittedly, they're not very deep movies, but I feel like some of them tried to be a little bit of a cut above. Not all of them, but I think some of them did try to be a little bit more, and we'll get to those when we talk about each individual film. But one thing I disagree with is a lot of people say, oh, they're basically the same movie. To an extent, that's true, but to another extent, I think each one tried to do something a little bit different, especially as the series went on, when you get the stuff like Jason Goes to Hell or Part 7 and stuff like that. So now let's start at the beginning, 1980's Friday the 13th, which was written by Victor Miller and directed by Sean S. Cunningham, who previously worked with Wes Craven on The Last House on the Left, and he would go on to direct movies like Deep Star 6, and he produced the House franchise, and he would probably be the first to admit this, that the film was basically a cash-in on John Carpenter's Halloween. However, I would argue that this is the film that really started that early 80s slasher boom. But what do you guys think of all that?
I mean, yeah, to an extent I agree, but, I mean, Friday the 13th, it really was, in effect, a ripoff of Halloween, just a much gorier and less subtle ripoff. I mean, Sean S. Cunningham in a documentary even admitted that when he saw Halloween, he needed to make some money, and he just said, well, Halloween's making a lot of money, so let's rip it off.
Because around this time period, that's when Halloween came out. People were inspired ripping off Halloween, but in different ways, like doing a holiday slasher film or just making up random slasher films off the top, like My Bloody Valentine or The Burning or Sleepaway Camp, all tons of rip-off slashers because they thought, hey, this is a slasher film. You don't really need a lot of effort to put into a slasher film. All you need is just a solid script and B-movie actors who are not known.
Now, I personally would argue a lot of people do kind of crap on this movie, saying, oh, it's poorly made, poorly acted. And honestly, I actually think it's a much more well-made movie than people give it credit for. Maybe it's not as well-made as Halloween, but I still think some of the shots are really good, and I actually don't mind the acting in the movie. Granted, some of it's better than others, but in general, I think for what the kind of movie that this is, the acting works for it.
Yeah, I mean, especially that of the late, great Betsy Palmer as Mrs. Voorhees. I mean, you know, when she finally shows up in the last, 20 or so minutes, she really does make that movie. She's very enjoyable to watch. She becomes very, at first she's like this sweet, old woman. You think, oh, she's going to be there to help her. And then when she just turns on Alice and becomes this crazed killer, she does so with this kind of psychotic glee that's just so much fun to watch.
The first time I saw this film, I was actually really surprised that Jason was not the killer. I'm like, what? Because as a kid, watching the other sequels before I saw the first film as a kid, I had no knowledge of the first film, how not knowing that Jason was not the killer really surprised me. It was like, wow, that explains how, the whole series turned out to be.
And here's the thing, though, in the first movie, it really is almost a whodunit in a way, because you don't really know who the killer is till the end. There's even, I think they try to set up that maybe Crazy Ralph is the killer or something. And then you don't find out till the end, no, the killer was just this woman who went a little crazy after her son died.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I've read the book Crystal Lake Memories, which features interviews from a lot of the cast and crew members. I remember one of the things Betsy said was, she said to Sean, you're not fighting fair, fella. You should at least let the audience know that I'm on the scene. Maybe have me in that diner that Chris Christie is at, and he just said, let him figure it out.
You see, that's actually one criticism I would have of the movie, is I actually think it would have worked a little better if they introduced the character of Pamela Voorhees earlier on, and then, then it's like, oh, a big shock when you find out, oh no, she was the killer.
Yeah. She just comes out of nowhere at the end. It's like, who is this woman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why, I'm Mrs. Voorhees, an old friend of the Christies.
How were you an old friend? That was never established. Were you ever seen talking to Steve Christie or associating with him in any way? No.
I mean, it's certainly a flawed movie, but it's a movie I've always enjoyed the hell out of. And I think for the kind of movie it is, it's definitely a good example of the slasher genre. It's not a particularly deep film by any means, but still, it's fun. It's fun, but there are little things that maybe you could analyze, but granted, a lot of the deeper themes in the film might just be accidental.
I mean, it's also fun to watch just to see, Kevin Bacon in one of his earliest roles. He had just done, Animal House before that, but really that was, that was his second or third film, so he wasn't really the respected actor he is today. So it's, just like any young actor who was in a horror movie who later made it big, it's fun to go back and watch them when they were nobodies,
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting because you see yourself wow, so this is where they started before they were big stars, and plus, Kevin Bacon's scene when he gets stabbed with the Tom Savini effect, that was a really great effect. That was wow, so very realistic for that. That's compare how they do it today with CGI probably.
Yeah, I remember I got Kevin Bacon's autograph a few times. I'm an autograph collector, and one of the times I did get him to sign that shot of him with the arrow through his neck, and then it was outside the stage door for The Late Show with David Letterman 2 years ago, and I remember seeing sometime later a clip of him from that interview where he actually described filming the death scene, and it's wow, he's so humble to be still talking about this after all this time and after he made it big. I mean, that's just great.
Well, it shows that he at least has respect for his roots, and here's the thing, though. I think this is a good example of the slasher genre, though. I mean, slasher films are a little different from, most horror films, where there are a lot of horror films where that you are meant to analyze them, and they are meant to be deeper. Slasher films are almost it's the subgenre of horror where horror could just cut loose, where it's just, you're not really watching it for any, deeper meaning, you're just watching it to have fun.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of the people who do make these movies, they are sort of aware of that. I mean, Betsy even admitted that she only took her role in the first movie because she needed money to make a new car. In fact...
To get a new car, yeah.
I mean, to get a new car.
It happens. I fuck up with my speech all the time.
In fact, she had said this, when she first read the script, she thought it was a piece of shit. But she thought, you know what, this movie will come, it will go, I will have my new car, and that'll be the end of it.
And one thing I really respect about Betsy Palmer is, for one, she does a great job in the movie, even though she didn't want to be there. Yes. But also it seems while I don't think she ever really liked the movie, she still showed some kind of respect for the legacy that the movie left behind.
Yeah, she was always wonderful to her fans when she would later make appearances at conventions. I actually, when my dad and I met her at, I think it was one of her last convention appearances in 2011 at the Second Childhood Memorabilia Show. It was the smallest convention I have ever been at. I mean, the whole thing was literally in one room. And, all the people who were there to sign autographs, they really didn't seem to be having anyone come to them. So when my dad and I went up to Betsy, she was like, oh, no one's doing any business. And my dad's like, oh, well, we're here to give you some business. And, she couldn't have been more accommodating. She was willing to speak to me, answered all my questions. I mean, she was just so lovely. And, when I took my photo with her, the first one was just of us kind of hugging like that. But then in the next one, she was nice enough to give me a nice big kiss on the cheek. So that was a wonderful memory.
John, what do you think of Betsy Palmer's performance?
I think her performance still holds up. Every time I watch that film, I'm oh my god, she is still scary to watch, and she does such a great job. And also that it's amazing how, despite like not being like a fan of like doing this film, but she still like did such a great job like really making the character realistic as if she really was the character.
And not to mention, even though she did, kind of try to sort of distance herself from it for a while, she still agreed to come back for a very brief cameo in Friday the 13th Part 2.
Yeah, we'll talk about that one.
Yeah. So.
And one thing I like about the character of Pamela Voorhees, granted she wasn't called Pamela Voorhees in this one, you don't find out till the sequels that was her name, but she is somewhat of a sympathetic villain to a certain extent because, like, you kind of get it. Like, she went crazy after her son died.
Oh, of course.
I mean, granted, the people she's going after have nothing to do with Jason's death, but still, it's like, you do feel for her to a certain extent.
Yeah, especially when she's like, Jason, my only child. You feel her sadness, and her misery.
And I almost feel like this is like a reverse Psycho in a way, where it's like, okay, instead of like the mother dying and the son like develops the split personality where he becomes his mother, it's like the reverse of that, where the son dies and this time the mother develops the split personality and thinks that she's Jason, like, kill her, mommy, kill her.
Oh, yeah, that was a great thing she did with her voice, where she made it sound, kind of like juvenile, like, a little kid. I thought that was a very nice, creepy touch.
I want to talk a little bit now. The sequels kind of went in a supernatural direction, but there really aren't any supernatural elements in the movie, except the ending, where you see the ghost of Jason, but that's more of a dream sequence. That was more inspired by Carrie, actually.
Yeah, that was really just kind of added on, like, sort of, not at the last minute, but kind of it was definitely not early in the production, like it was Tom Savini's idea, I believe. They needed some kind of final, hook at the end.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to talk about, though, even though there aren't really any supernatural elements in the film, I've kind of made my own interpretation that since, you know how Crazy Ralph keeps going, the place has a death curse?
Yeah.
Something I'm surprised that the sequels never really touched on is, what if the camp really did have a death curse, and what if, like, Jason's death in 57 and the killings that Pamela Voorhees are doing are just part of this curse or something? Like, what if Pamela is more so just a puppet for some higher force that controls what's going on at the camp? Like, that would have been an interesting angle to go with the sequels. And even when they do go outright supernatural in the sequels, I'm surprised they never did something where they tried to say that the lake had supernatural properties or something, sort of like a Lazarus Pit sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely would have been an interesting angle to explore. That this whole kind of seemingly quaint lakeside community could be haunted by some evil supernatural force. Yeah, I could have, I would have thought that was interesting. But, people wanted Jason, so that's what they went with.
And then, of course, we have Harry Manfredini's phenomenal score in the movie. And Manfredini, he's a composer who I do like, but one thing I've noticed is some of his other movies that he's scored sound very similar to the Friday the 13th theme. Like, if you ever seen the movie House, he did the score for that, and it's basically the Friday the 13th score.
Yeah, the score definitely works for the film. When the Annie is running away from Mrs. Voorhees after she leaps out of the Jeep, the music is very tense and it's quick, and to match her running in terror. So I think it works.
Any closing thoughts on the movie?
I mean, one thing we haven't mentioned yet is that, one of the flaws of the movie is that it definitely has way too much filler in it. I mean, so many scenes kind of are just showing the characters doing some, mundane things, and they go on too long.
To be fair, that's actually something I really like about the movie. I just like how the characters are just they're kind of goofy, and I don't know, I liked the whole where Ned is like acting like freaking Tonto or something.
I mean, I didn't mind that. I'm talking about the scenes where they're like, I think Alice is trying to make coffee, or they're playing the strip Monopoly game, and it's just, they have their characters, they have lives, but at the same time...
To be fair, you could argue that that's an attempt at character development, though.
Yeah.
It never bothered me.
Not only that, but when... there's the part towards the end where Bill, played by Harry Crosby, is going to, out in the rain to check the lights, and it goes on forever, and he's just, like, tinkering, I think, with something. It's like, what is this leading to? Come on.
Yeah, but I do think, one thing I forgot to bring up is I do think there are some genuine genuinely creepy freaking moments in the film, like the scene where, uh, shit, I forgot her name. Brenda. Brenda is in the cabin and she hears the "help me" out in the distance. That's a creepy scene.
Yeah, when I first saw the movie on TV as a kid, I remember being very creeped out by that scene. And then she, goes out to investigate in the rain, and her death isn't shown, but you see what happened later when her body gets thrown through the window.
Yeah. And I actually do really like the main character, Alice.
Yeah,
she's a very likable character. Adrienne King does a great job as Alice in the film. And I like how there's sort of an implication that she might have been sleeping with the guy who runs the camp.
Christie. Yeah, I think that was intentional, and that they did that, and I think it kind of makes her more sympathetic because this man that she slept with, he's kind of trying to run this camp, and it's kind of a gamble because there's been some bad stuff happening in the past, and she realizes, oh my god, I'm stuck in this situation.
What do you think of Alice?
Yeah, she's a great character. I mean, interesting. I mean, I have to admit, not as much like the way like Laurie is, but at the same time, she's definitely someone I still enjoy like to explore in the film and have my more time investigating in.
I would argue that she's of the the teenage Granted, I don't know if the characters are really supposed to be teenagers or early 20s. Obviously, the actors are early 20s, but of those characters, of the victims in the movie, she's probably the most likable and the most sympathetic, I would think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You really root for her to pull through in the end.
Yeah.
I think because out of all the characters, you're like really like the one she's like the most sympathy for, unlike the other ones. When the other ones like go, you're like, they weren't that likable.
Well, it's not that they weren't likable. I mean, I still felt bad for them when they died.
Sure, yeah. Especially Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, especially him.
Because he died right after sex. And he was smoking a joint.
Yeah.
He was having a good time. It's not fair.
I know, it wasn't. And his death was, that must, they're all painful, but to get it in the neck like that, it really shoved up,
Just the thought of it.
And it didn't, go through right away. You see it has to really get pushed through, so that must have...
I've seen pictures of how it was done. It's really amazing how they did it. It's like, wow.
Yeah, it was not a simple process.
No.
He had to be on his knees, with his head sticking out through a hole under the bed when they had the fake, chest in front of him. And he had to be on his knees for a long while, so it was not fun for him.
Now I would like to introduce my friend Chris, who was supposed to record the podcast with us, but unfortunately he couldn't make it. So afterwards I ended up recording his audio of him giving his thoughts on each film in this series. So here are his thoughts on the original Friday the 13th.
The first one is a really cool sort of gem in the slasher film lexicon, because I think the thing that really makes it unique is it's a whodunit where the person who did it is introduced until 10 minutes before you find out it's them. You have all this crazy carnage going on, and then all of a sudden this friendly old lady shows up, and you're like, how is she going to factor into this? And then you realize she's the killer, and it really kind of throws you for a loop. And it makes for almost like a different movie on the second watch. So that's what I think is unique for it. And it's cool that it stays that unique, even though it's the one that doesn't have Jason as the killer. It's interesting how they both work together in that way.
So now let's talk about the first of the Friday the 13th sequels, Friday the 13th Part 2, which this time is directed by Steve Miner, who would also direct the third one as well. And I think Steve Miner also did work on the first movie. I think he was was he an associate director, an associate producer or something?
Not entirely sure. I think it was something in that capacity.
Yeah. But this was originally this wasn't even going to be a direct sequel to the first one. They kind of tried to do something that John Carpenter wanted to do with the Halloween series, where it was going to be an anthology where each film would simply take place on Halloween, or Friday the 13th, I mean. But Friday the 13th Part 2, I love the hell out of this one, and honestly, I think this is just as good as the first one, and I think both this and the first one make a great, double feature. But, John, what do you think of Part 2?
Let's see. Part 2 was pretty decent, even though, because what I've read and learned, that there could have been, other, story ideas they wanted to use for this, because, for instance, Alice from the first film, she was going to be the main character in this one, but because of like some fans stalking her, she had to cut it short because of that. And
Yeah, I mean, that is true. She did have a severe stalking incident in her real life, and the stalker was following her for quite a while, which is why she did want to come back, but she requested that her, work on the film, her screen time be as minimal as possible. But I believe she also did still want them to leave it open for her to return, once, maybe the stalking died down and, she could come back better, in a bigger role. And unfortunately, they didn't do that because, they kill her off right at the beginning, which is very disappointing.
Yeah. Now, one thing that I think is interesting about this is really in this one, I don't think people really knew that Jason was going to end up being the killer in this one, because he was just a kid who was said to die in the first one, but here they actually make him the killer, which for the time, that was probably a really original way to go about it, I think. I mean, and you even get some of the implication that, okay, maybe this time Crazy Ralph will be the killer, but then you see him get killed, and I think that's sort of like the twist, even though it's like sort of like maybe it's not even a twist, but like, okay, this time Jason's the killer.
I mean, even as a big Friday the 13th fan, I must, admit that having Jason come back is, one of the biggest plot holes of all time. I mean, the whole series after part 1 is, you could argue, one big plot hole because he's supposed to have drowned. I mean, first of all, how the heck did he survive drowning? And even then, why didn't he just go back to his mother and avoid the whole thing that happened, with part 1?
I mean, there is sort of like, in the sequels that follow this, they get a little more supernatural, where they say, like, okay, Jason did die and he came back from the dead. There's that, but the movie clearly tries to make you think that Jason didn't actually die and he somehow lived and was living out in the woods somewhere. I mean, yes, it is a bit of a plot hole, but I can look past it. I really can.
that was always confusing to me as a kid watching the films. Like, wait a minute, how is it that, like, if Jason was said to not be dead, how is it he didn't, like, find his mother? But at the same time, like you said, it's just a small, minor thing. And also, I remember like, watching the documentary. His name was Jason. I don't remember who said it, but he said, thank God they killed off Jason's mother in the first film, because if it wasn't for his mother dying in the first film, we would not have had, like, Freddy versus Jason, or, also, like, the great moments of Jason, too.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I say it is a plot hole, I do obviously still enjoy seeing Jason, running, well, not running, but, going or stalking around, doing his thing, so, yeah, I can look past it.
What do you guys think of, like, some of the characters in the film? Because I happen to really enjoy the characters, especially the main character, Ginny, played by Amy Steele. I think she's a really good character, and the other characters are really fun as well. Once again, not deep characters, but still fun characters.
Yeah, I enjoy Jenny, too. Another character I want to mention in this movie is... I forget his name, but the one who was confined to a wheelchair, that character I really liked, because, you already feel so sorry for him having to be in a wheelchair, so to have to, get killed by Jason, it's like, seriously? You gotta do that to him, too? So that's a character you really feel extra sympathy for.
I think that character's name was Mark.
Mark, right.
Could be wrong in that, but I would have to look that up again or watch the movie again.
Yeah, and I mean, the character, he seemed like a nice guy, someone you'd want to be friends with. I mean,
Yeah.
So he was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's something you might not be able to get away with now, is seeing some guy in a wheelchair get killed, especially like that.
Yeah, like getting a machete to the face and then falling down all those stairs.
Jason gave no fucks. He gave
of course
no
not.
fucks.
No fucks at all.
I want to point out, like, some of the similarities between this and, like, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because in this one they give you this idea that Jason is very much a man with the mind of a child, very much like Leatherface. I saw that as sort of like I think they were definitely taking off Texas Chainsaw Massacre in that regard.
I never thought of it that way.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that also his appearance for most of the movie, where he's got the bag over the head with the one eye hole, that was inspired by the horror movie from the 70s, The Town That Dreaded Sundown.
Yeah.
Which was interesting.
There are also a lot of the kill sequences in this movie were inspired by, not even inspired, were directly ripping off the kill sequences from the Giallo film Bay of Blood, which was directed by Mario Bava.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to say about one of the characters was my favorite character in that film was Amy Steele's character. What was her name? Jenny. Jenny. She just like Alice in the first film. You like really root for her to survive, and also like I thought it was interesting. Like in the end of the film, like when she when you see like the corpse head of Jason's mother. And she dresses up as Jay. I thought it was like an interesting like plan how to get out of the situation, even though it was a good attempt, but it just didn't work out.
Yeah, and I mean, like I mentioned before, I really do like that Betsy agreed to come back for the cameo, even though she really had a real distaste for the movies. And I think it was smart to have her as a hallucination in Jason's mind, since her character is dead. And it's just great to see her back, even if it's just for a brief moment.
I do want to touch on some of the controversy of who actually played Jason in the movie, because throughout a lot of the movie, you see Jason with a sack over his head, and he's actually played by actor Steve Dashowitz, but at the end, when you see Jason without the sack on his head, he's played by actor Warrington Gillette, and for years, people thought that Warrington Gillette played Jason throughout the whole movie. Then it came out a few years ago, no, Steve Dashowitz actually played Jason way more than Warrington Gillette did.
Yeah, Warrington Gillette started out as Jason, and I believe they filmed, the ending scenes where he's unmasked and crashing through the window first. And, he had a lot of heavy makeup on, and I read that he just couldn't stand it. He thought they went too far, so he quit the movie. So then they got Steve Dash to play him, and even though Steve Dash did more of the work and was in the movie more, and he even, during a fight scene got one of his fingers sliced, he still only got credited as, the Jason stunt double, while Warrington Gillette still got the main credit as Jason, which is just, I think that's unfair.
One thing I really like about this film is, like, once again, this is before they really introduced the supernatural elements to the series, and this one, Jason, he's very much like Leatherface. He's just this deformed, mentally challenged man. And there are some really creepy moments in the film, like the scene where Ginny and Paul get back from drinking, and they're in, like, the house, and, like, Ginny sees Jason in the room, and she knows somebody's in the room, but it's so dark Paul can't see, and she's not even sure if she's actually seeing this. Like, that's actually a pretty creepy scene.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh yeah, very realistic right there, especially like in a situation like that. You're like thinking, oh god, what do I do in this situation when it's dark, not knowing what's going on, can't see anything.
Yeah, and going back to the whole, controversy with Steve Dash and Warrington Gillette, I think it's interesting to note that, I've gotten Steve Dash's autograph a few times, and whenever he writes his autograph, he always puts "the real Jason" underneath, which I think is very telling.
Now here's my friend Chris giving his thoughts on Friday the 13th Part 2.
This one is just like pure escalation, because like they're starting to realize that this is going to be a franchise, and they want to see what they can do with it. So they bring back Jason from the dead, and obviously, like, he's a behemoth and stuff like that. He's only wearing the sack. He's not wearing the hockey mask yet. And it's kind of starting to form the tropes that will inform these movies. So it definitely is an important one in that way. And other than that, I mean, it's a fun watch too, because like they bring back Betsy. There's some really good kills in it. It's pretty awesome.
Now let's move on to Friday the 13th Part 3, which came out in 1982 and was once again directed by Steve Miner. And this is the first film where Jason gets what will become his iconic hockey mask, even though he doesn't get the mask till halfway through the film. But Part 3, I do like this one a lot, but I don't know if I like it as much as other people do, because I know this is sort of a fan favorite among a lot of Friday the 13th fans, but I do like it. It has some likable characters, especially Shelley, especially the main character, Chris, but it's a good one, but I don't like it as much as the first two.
I mean, it's definitely an entry to be appreciated, since it is, as you said, the one that gives him his iconic hockey mask. And, there are some cool characters. And, Shelley, he is the practical joker who's, kind of seen by the rest of them as a nuisance. So, even though some of his jokes are stupid and annoying, you do feel sorry for him. You do hope that he, gets what he wants, which is to be with a pretty girl and, of course, make it out alive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I felt bad for Shelley because, like, you could tell this guy, and maybe this was accidental. I don't know if this was the filmmaker's intentions, and I could just be reading way deeper into this than was actually intended, but it sort of seemed like the guy definitely had some problems, like mental problems or something.
Self-esteem problems.
Yeah, definitely socially awkward. And the thing is, like, I understand Shelley. I've met people like Shelley John, and I'm kidding. But no, I mean, like Shelley, you feel for him. Like, he just wants some attention, but he's not going about it the right way.
Yeah, I mean, there are ways to try to make friends, and then there are ways to not try to make friends. There are definitely do's and don'ts, and unfortunately for Shelley, he tends to do a lot of the don'ts, like pretending to have a machete stuck in your head to make everyone think you're dead. That's definitely a don't.
Yeah, and John.
I will admit, Shelley was somewhat like funny, stupid, and annoying, but at the same time, he just did not know any better. Like, understand, like, this is not how you like what you do with when you make new friends.
I also loved those two hippie characters who were with them because, like, I love the scene where they almost hit the old man, and the old man's lying on the ground, and the guy's like, "You look just like my grandpa."
I don't remember that, but I have to watch this movie again.
Yeah, those hippie stoner characters were pretty amusing. Actually, when I was younger, I wrote a letter to actor David Cadams, who played, I forget the character's name, but he played the male one. And he said that during the filming of his death scene, where he gets electrocuted, they did makeup for a shot that would show a close-up of his, burned, electrocuted face, which unfortunately was not used in the final cut. But they did do makeup for such a shot. Those were his own words. So it's a shame we never saw it, because I think it would have been a nice touch.
One thing I really want to point out about this movie is, in the movie, it's kind of implied, because in the movie you find out that the main character, Chris, actually had a run-in with Jason a few years prior to this, and it's very much implied that Jason raped Chris. That's what a lot of fans speculate, but what do you guys think of that?
I mean, I'll be honest, this is the first time I'm ever hearing that theory. I mean, to me, Jason never really seemed like the type to be interested in anyone sexually. He wants to kill. But...
Well, to be fair, this was still early in the series, where I don't even know what... I don't think they really had a clear definition of what they wanted Jason to be. Yeah. I mean, if that is the case, I mean, even if he didn't rape her, still, like, she had an encounter with him, and this movie could be read, and once again, maybe I'm reaching deeper than was intended, but it could be read as sort of like a commentary on, like, post-traumatic stress or something.
Even though I have seen this film before, but it's been a while since I just don't remember that part in that movie. It's like one of those things I just gotta rewatch and refresh my memory on that one.
I do want to point out that when you see Jason without the mask, he's freaking creepy looking.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he is, and unfortunately, for a lot of the movie, his face is always obscured. It's not really until the end where you see, that deformed face. His deformed face, whenever he's unmasked, definitely looks different with each film, and I think that was like one of the best ones, because it was really just, it was like some nightmarish thing from some other world.
I do want to point out at the end there's sort of a callback to the first one, where after Chris quote-unquote kills Jason, she goes out onto the lake, and all of a sudden you see the ghost of Pamela Voorhees come out of the lake, which was a nice little callback to the first one. But that's where it's like, okay, was that a dream or was that supernatural? Because how would she even know who Pamela Voorhees was?
I mean, obviously, I think that was just there to kind of, like you said, be a throwback to the original, and, they thought that would be a great twist, this time instead of Jason, let's make it Pamela, which, was a good idea in theory, but I agree, though, how would she know who she was?
Like I said, I gotta watch this again. It's been a while since I've seen this. There's not much I can say about this film.
Well, John, you're being kicked off the podcast. Go away.
I do have a lot to say for part 4. That's the one I have a lot to say about that one.
Yes, me too.
Now, this one was also released in 3D when it came out, and I think 1982, that was almost like the year of 3D movies. You had Jaws 3D, Amityville 3D.
Yeah, 3D was really a a big thing at the time. That was like the big 3D boom back then. I've never seen the movie in 3D, and I really don't ever intend to. I kind of prefer 2D. 3D sometimes, hurts my eyes.
Yeah. And I do like how this one literally picks up right where part 2 left off. Like, this is only taking place like a day or two after part 2.
Yeah, so I think that I've heard people say that makes this one take place on Saturday the 14th.
Well, to be fair, they never actually said that part 2 even took place on Friday the 13th. Honestly, like, the way I see it, like, of the first 4 Friday the 13th movies, the only one that I think actually takes place on Friday the 13th is the first one. I mean, maybe, but why would Jason just kill on Friday the 13th? I mean,
Yeah, you've got a good point.
yeah.
He's not selective on the days.
That'd be like in like Halloween, if Michael Myers just killed on Halloween, they made a different film where it did not take place on Halloween.
Yeah. But they still called it on Halloween.
Yeah, that's true. Point taken. Well, one more thing about the 3D thing, like, I actually never seen it in 3D, but I've seen like people on YouTube talk about what they thought the experience in 3D. They said it's terrible. They said when they watch it, their eyes get blurry, and they also like the effect is just terrible.
Now here's Chris giving his thoughts on Friday the 13th, part 3.
Part 3 is where everything really starts clicking into place, because obviously Jason gets the hockey mask, and the supporting characters really start to shine through, because they're ultimately who you're going to be invested in for most of these movies. I love the what was
Shelley?
no, not that one. When he kills her with the harpoon. What was that character's name?
Oh, that's, I forgot her name, actually.
Yeah, that's a really unique one, because that's also the first time he gets a kill while wearing the mask, too, so it's almost like a formative moment. That's definitely the one that stands out the most in my mind with this one.
Now let's move on to Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, which was released in 1984 and was meant to be the final film in the franchise, but because Paramount was making a fuck ton of money from this series, they decided to continue on after this, but it was meant to be the final film. Now, if this was the final film, do you think this would have been a good way to cap off the series?
I mean, I think so. They definitely had some, great characters, some great Jason kills, and at the end, Jason does get killed in my opinion, a very grand, gory, spectacular way. So, yeah, I really think this would have been a great one to go out on.
Yeah, it could have been interesting. Like if this is like the last one with Jason, you could have had like maybe start a new series. Like maybe like Tommy could have been the killer in the next like Friday movies or something like that.
Well, they kind of tried to establish that in part 5, but we'll talk about that more. But this is one I kind of go back and forth on. I do like it, but I sometimes debate with myself whether I love it or just like it, because I do think it's a great movie, but there are little things about it that kind of annoy me. Like, honestly, I've never liked Tommy Jarvis's sister, Trish. For some reason, she always annoyed the crap out of me. I mean, but still, it introduces Tommy Jarvis, played by Corey Feldman, who... Tommy Jarvis is a fantastic character, and this kickstarts what a lot of Friday the 13th fans call the Tommy Jarvis trilogy.
Yeah, Corey Feldman's great to watch in the movie. He's very, mischievous little kid, for lack of a better term. And the fact that he's sort of based off Tom Savini, because he makes the masks and he's into that stuff, I think that's great,
Yeah, I do want to point out that this time Tom Savini returns to the series to do the makeup effects.
Yeah, and I read he agreed to do it because he wanted to finally kill off the character he helped create.
Yeah, Tommy, he's a cool guy because I like it how like he likes like these all like weird creepy masks, kind of like how like the way I was when I was a kid. Like I always saw creepy masks, I always had to wear it no matter what. And also,
but did you make masks?
No, I did. I wish I did. Let's see, what else do I like about? I like how Tommy like sort of like becomes somewhat the hero, but then the ending of it kind of like makes you wonder if he could be the killer in the next film. Kind of in some ways when you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, because he is so obsessed with making these monster masks and all that, I guess other people could view him as strange and weird. And then, he has this whole thing with Jason happen. So, of course, that's going to, screw with him in the head a little. So, it's an interesting character arc, I think.
Now, I I want to point out that I feel like this is the first film in the series that kind of implies that Jason might be a supernatural being, because Jason clearly died in part 3. He got an axe in his head, yet he somehow comes back in this, and they don't explain how he came back. So I feel like this is the first time where they're implying that perhaps Jason is not a normal human being.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Although, I mean, they may imply that he's not a normal human being, but he's still not exactly the indestructible zombie that he later becomes. You know, when they hit him with something or stab him, he still feels it. He's still in pain. Whereas in later movies, he just doesn't even bat an eye, you know?
What do you think of some of the other characters? Like, one character in the movie that really interests me is the character of Rob, who's actually the brother of the character of Sandra, who's killed in part 2. He comes back in this, and, like, he's supposed to be getting his revenge on Jason, and I thought that was kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, the idea of Jason being the hunted instead of, I mean, he's still the hunter in this movie, but he's also being the hunted. I thought that was a great angle, you know, to have this really vengeful, vengeance-obsessed guy just gunning for him, even though he knows that he is risking his own life in doing so.
What do you think of, like, the other characters in the movie?
Well, there's Jimmy, played by a then unknown Crispin Glover, who is always fun to watch.
I
As is
love
Crispin
the
Glover.
breakdancing scenes.
Yes,
Yes.
I agree. That's one of my favorite parts of the movie and the series.
No way! Not tonight! No!
There's a fact I have about it. They originally were going to do an AC/DC song in that scene, but I don't know like what happened, like why they didn't do the AC/DC
Yeah,
song.
I guess they probably couldn't get the rights.
And
Probably.
about Crispin Glover, you know, like Kevin Bacon, you know, who went on to become big after, you know, being in a horror movie, he's still very humble, and he's willing to talk about it. I met him earlier this year at one of the screenings of one of his independent films that he made, and yeah, he was totally down to talk about it. You know, I asked him if it was true that Ted White, who played Jason, you know, stayed away from the rest of the cast to, you know, make them more scared of him, and he said, "Oh no, I don't think that's true. In fact, he told me to." He says he gave him a bit of bad acting advice when they filmed his death scene. He said, "You know, when I get the meat cleaver in my face, he told me to scream." And I thought, well, you shouldn't do that, because if you have that happen to you, you're not going to be able to scream. So I didn't do that. But yeah, he didn't think he did that. I mean, maybe I don't know. That was just Crispin's take.
Yeah. And it's funny, like, I remember watching this as a little kid and seeing, like, and I've seen Back to the Future before this movie, and I've seen The Goonies before this movie, and I'm like, as a little kid going, hey, wait a minute, that's Mel from The Goonies, and then seeing, like, Crispin Glover, I was like, wait a minute, that's Marty McFly's dad.
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty interesting to see him before Back to the Future. Before I saw him in this movie, I don't think I'd ever seen him with blonde hair. You know, usually he has black hair. You know, in this movie, he plays... I mean, his character is pretty sympathetic. You know, he just got dumped by his former girlfriend.
Something we can all relate to.
Yes, and...
Well, I can't relate to that, John, so calm down.
And, you know, he's always hanging out with his kind of douchebag best friend who's calling him
It says you're a dead fuck.
Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, how can you not feel bad for a guy who's hanging out with a guy like that, constantly being down on him? You know?
I actually can relate to that in some ways. You know, yeah. Maybe then again, even though like friends can we could all be assholes to each other, but at the same time, it just shows that we're all true friends and we're all here for each other no matter what.
I'm not here for you, John. But I enjoy this one. I think it's definitely a good addition to the series. Once again, it introduces Tommy Jarvis.
I have a fact. Ted White, the stuntman, despite like he avoided the cast members, even though he was playing the kill throughout the entire film, he actually, what's interesting about I've read that you actually like have a little sympathy for him like off the set, because one of the scenes they shot with Judy Aronson when they did the swimming scene, she actually was having like, you know, getting cold and hypothermia, and the director was like being such an asshole to her, but then Ted White got up saying like, listen, if you stop treating her like this, I'm gonna quit this movie if you don't stop treating her like that.
Did he say it wearing the Jason mask? Listen!
Okay, that I don't know, but I just know that Ted White was such like really kind to Judy Aronson that, oh my god.
I do want to ask, you might know this more than I do. Is it true that apparently Corey Feldman was such a pain in the ass on the set?
I've heard that before.
Yeah, I've met Ted White, who's a very nice guy, and, you know, I think he's one of the best Jasons. I met him twice, and the second time, one of the questions I asked him was, what was working with Corey Feldman like? And he just says, he was a mean little kid. I mean, Ted White. Yeah, I think he definitely he was a great Jason. Yeah, he looks, he's big, he's tall, he's menacing, and when he grabs someone, he really just he put even though, because like Betsy Palmer, he's admitted that he only took the role due to the money, and he even requested that his name be taken off the film. But I think he still put his all into it, which is to be commended. And again, he's a very nice guy, and he definitely has a big appreciation for his fans, and he's had a great career as a stuntman. He doubled for John Wayne. He doubled for I think Clark Gable. He's been around, and that's to be respected in my opinion.
So, before we move on to the other sequels, any closing thoughts on Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter, the quote-unquote final chapter?
Well, I mean, it's definitely, I think, one of the most enjoyable in the series. I enjoy it, and, it would have been, like I said before, a great one to go out on. Part of me thinks they should have gone out on it because, well, I mean, it was a great one to go out on. That's all I can say. It had a great ending, and actually, another thing I want to mention is the Hitch-Hiker Scene, which I think,
love that scene.
Yes, I'm glad I remembered that because that has, all the Friday the 13th deaths are gory and disgusting, but there's something about stabbing someone in the throat while they're eating something and watching the half chewed up food just dribble out that just really grosses me out, especially.
I want to point out, I was at a film festival a couple of years ago, and I saw a short film that was a spoof on slasher films, and there was actually a parody of that scene in that short film.
Really?
Unfortunately, I forgot the name of the short film, otherwise I would totally name it right now so people could try to check it out.
Yeah, and another thing I want to mention about the Hitchhiker Scene is what I find hilarious. Right before her death occurs, the main characters are passing her by, and
hey, honey, you got a sister!
Yeah, that's funny. But no, the funniest part about that scene for me is, at first she's holding this, hippie, peace-loving sign, and then as soon as they pass her by and scream that, she just does a complete 180, flips it around, flips them off, and the sign says, "Fuck you."
And I just love how hilarious. That was written on there already.
But yeah, I agree. The fact that that was already written, like she was preparing for it, yeah, that just makes it all the more hilarious.
That scene was funny, but at the same time, it's like, oh my, like you feel bad for her, like what happens to her when she gets like stabbed to the throat after eating a banana. Every time I did banana, I think about that scene. I kid you not.
Yeah, and just one more thing. The opening scene, with the kind of douchebag mortician, and he, I've always wondered this. What kind of video is that? I think a lot of people have wondered that. The video he's watching with the girls in the leatards. Is it a workout tape? Is it porn?
I think it's a workout tape.
I think it's porn, yeah. To me, it's porn.
Well, workout tapes are porn, John. I don't know how you use workout tapes, but here are Chris's thoughts on Friday the 13th, the final chapter.
This one is, I think, a lot of people's favorites because you got Crispin Glover, who's just like insane in everything he does. I think it was Adam Green that said this one had the most distinct group of teenagers, and I think he's probably right because they all stand out really well, and they all feel like it feels shitty when they get killed off because we are invested in them. It's not like a usual slasher film where we're just waiting for people to die. And then obviously the introduction of Tommy, who was a godsend to a lot of horror fans because he was this big horror nerd and he made masks and stuff. And his arc across the next 3 movies is really significant, particularly if you're somebody who is interested in horror heroes and that kind of thing. So this kind of launches that whole arc, and it's awesome. And I love the ending when he's just stabbing Jason endlessly. It's really fun to watch.
Now let's move on to Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning, which is the one where Jason wasn't the killer, which he wasn't the killer in the first film, but this time it really pissed people off that Jason wasn't the killer. And in a lot of ways, I would almost say this is the Halloween 3 of the Friday the 13th movies. Jason's not the killer, and a lot of people hate it for that, but honestly, I happen to really enjoy this one. But what do you guys think of this one?
Yeah, there are enjoyable parts of it, but yeah, the twist about it being, Roy Burns at the end, who was the hospital orderly whose son Joey was killed, yeah, that was a little, I think, lazily handled, but...
A little bit. I mean, as a little kid watching this movie, I always thought, oh wow, what a cool twist. As an adult, now I'm like, yeah, it's not the best.
Yeah,
but
I mean, Roy Burns, when he's not, in the Jason costume, he's like, almost like sort of a minor character, almost like an extra who has like one or two lines. I mean, he's, you do see that when Joey is killed, you see the close-up of his disturbed face, but that's really all the, major emphasis that's put on him. He's not interacting much, he's not a major part of it.
although there is an interesting scene where, like, the sheriff, it's after those two greaser guys are killed. The sheriff's like looking at the crime scene and all that. He's like, what the hell's going on here? And Roy turns to him going, you're talking to me, Sheriff? I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I guess. And, Roy Burns, when he's out of the costume, is played by Dick, I think his last name is pronounced Weand. And when he's in costume, he's played by stuntman Tom Morga. And, Tom Morga, he's a stuntman, so he's noticeably bigger and bulkier, so it's like...
One thing I want to point out is, like, okay, so in the movie, the character of Roy Burns, for those of you who haven't seen it, like, he dresses up as Jason and he essentially becomes a Jason copycat. My issue with that, though, is there are scenes where it looks like he has superhuman strength when he obliterates that door, and it's like, okay, it's like,
Yeah, and I think that adds to what I was saying about how, when he's out of costume, he's not, exceptionally built, to be able to do that stuff, and it just doesn't fit well with the continuity of it, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. One thing I do like about this movie, though, is I think this one tried to be a little more psychological and definitely much more of a character study on how much the events of Part 4 have really traumatized Tommy Jarvis. And that's one thing I really appreciate about this and why it's one of my personal favorites of the series is that they tried to be a cut above, I think. I think they tried to make this a much more of a psychological horror film. There's still some stupid stuff in the movie, but I think this one tried to be a little different and a little better.
Yeah, I think it did so too. And it's the cameo at the beginning from Corey Feldman is definitely nice to see. I think he was originally supposed to be in the starring role, but he was busy filming The Goonies at the time and couldn't. So unfortunately, this is all we got. And as when you mention stupid stuff in the movie, there's a lot to be told about that, especially those two like hillbilly hick characters.
Will you shut the fuck up?
The one going around on his motorcycle just.
He heard me, Mom. He heard me.
You gotta kill them all. Yeah, I mean it's just so annoying, and it goes on and on.
But John, you're laughing your head off right now. Why don't you give your thoughts on Part 5?
Part 5, I don't really really hate this, like, I have, like, mixed opinions about the film. There are the parts I do like, some things I don't like, I was a little bit upset that Jason was not the killer, but the first time I saw it, I thought to myself, okay, Jason's back. He must have came back somehow, but they don't explain it. But then towards the end, I'm like, what? I mean, are you kidding me? Wait a minute. The whole time, it was not Jason. It was just some...
It was the butler.
Yeah, it was kind of like maybe like Clue or something, Whodunit or something like that. And then...
Technically, though, Jason does appear in the film
in
as
dream
as
sequences.
hallucinations.
Yeah.
Tom Morga. I remember seeing him in the documentary once saying, people always say to me, "Oh, you didn't really play Jason. You just played, the imposter." And he said, "No, I played Jason. Yes, I played him in the hallucination scenes too."
That counts.
Yeah. One thing I think is interesting is in the hallucination scenes, or the scenes like where you see the ghost of Jason. Really, it's hallucinations, but it's Jason from the first 3 sequels, or, like, he has the same hockey mask, but, like, when you see what you think is Jason, but you find out he's Roy, it's a different type of hockey mask. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I guess you could say they were trying to give it an upgrade, although I think I do prefer the older version of it.
Well, it makes more sense this time around, though, because this time it's like, okay, it's not actually Jason.
Although, I gotta say, I think Jason... I don't think he's that picky over hockey masks. I think he'd choose anyone as long as it's, his hockey mask.
I actually do like it how they show the scenes with Tommy, like, having, like, psychological problem because of the event that happened in Part 4. It makes you wonder, like, could it be possible that experience that he may become the killer in the future, possibly? It's, like, one of those, like, things that keep you guessing and going. I always like movies like that.
I think John Shepard did a fantastic job in this movie as Tommy Jarvis. You really feel bad for him, but he definitely plays it as somebody who... This guy could snap at any moment.
Yeah, I think he did a good job too. In fact, there's that one scene in the beginning, not well, sort of well into the movie, where they're all the teenagers.
They're
at
all
that.
having breakfast.
Yeah,
and
they're
then-
eating
yeah.
the breakfast, and one of them actually has the stupid idea to scare him with one of his masks, and of course he goes into full on attack mode. But he doesn't go into attack mode right away. I think he just he stands there and just gets real tensed up, and then he does it. It's almost like he's trying to hold it back, but it just takes over him.
Once again, I think it's an underrated edition of the series. I like how it tried to be more of a psychological character study. Well, it does have some dumb things in it, but then again, a lot of slasher films have dumb things in it. Once again, the slasher genre, it's not... Slasher films are not the most sophisticated kind of horror films. Usually they're just meant to be fun, but I appreciated that this one tried to be a little bit more than that, though.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can appreciate it for that too. And it does have the ending, which leads you on to believe that Tommy Jarvis is officially going to take up Jason's mantle. Of course, that is later discarded.
Who was the actress who survived them? What was her name? What the character's name was?
Pam. The character's name was Pam. I don't remember the actress's name.
I met her at Chiller Theater 4 years ago, and I asked what happened. And she said that they did not want to go in the direction where Tommy could be the killer. And she said that she turned down part 6 because she did not like the way the script was and the direction was going.
Yeah, the actress who played one of the teenagers, one of the especially horny ones, is named Debbie Sue Voorhees, and she actually was a school teacher in real life and sadly lost some teaching jobs because of her role in this film, which I think is just wrong.
It is. I mean, it's not like she was making a porno movie. Why?
She might as well have been.
Well, yeah, but I mean, still, it was what she did when she was an actress. That should have no bearing on her ability to teach, in my opinion.
And even if she was in porno films, who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
Here are Chris's thoughts on Friday the 13th, Part 5.
Now, this is the one that everybody gives shit to, but I will say that I like it because it almost has like a slasher, psychological thriller subplot to it. It's about like Tommy's psychological state after everything that happened in Part 4 and him kind of trying to figure out whether or not he's going to overcome it or just sort of give into it. And given the ending, you'd think that obviously he'd give into it, but that's what makes Part 6 so significant, is that he ends up being the hero of the franchise, oddly. So I think this one deserves credit for that. On top of that, this one actually had some good characters too, especially the little kid. He was really great, and kind of watching him, you really hope he's going to make it through, because it'd be fucked up to watch him die. So yeah, I do like this one.
Now let's move on to Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, which honestly I think might be the best film in the franchise. And what I really like about this one is it's basically a horror comedy, and it's sort of a self-aware spoof on the entire franchise. And in a lot of ways I would compare this to Scream, which came out 10 years later, but in my opinion this does it a million times better than Scream. I think this is... I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about Scream. John, I know how you feel about Scream, but, Scream to me, I'm just not a fan of those movies, but this one, I feel like, actually really is a clever parody of the slasher genre.
I mean, I, for one, am a big fan of Scream. I mean, I never really thought of that, the comparison between them before, but, I definitely do like this entry in the series. It definitely has a fantastic opening. It's dark, it's foggy, they're coming to the graveyard, and, the opening to me is also a very good lesson in just, leaving well enough alone. Tommy would do well to learn that lesson,
Yeah, but to be fair, he was so traumatized that he needed to see Jason's body and destroy it to stop the hallucinations.
Yes, he'll stop the hallucinations and he'll bring back the real thing. That's totally better.
Well, to be fair, I mean, there's no way that was actually going to happen. He could not have predicted that.
With all that he's seen, he shouldn't have been surprised.
But this is the first time where Jason is outright supernatural.
What did he think this was going to bring him anyway? I mean, he'd probably...
Closure. Closure, Jeremy. Closure.
I think maybe because Tommy was still maybe concerned, just because they claim Jason is dead doesn't really mean he could be dead, but if you think about it, the opening scene kind of feels a little bit like Frankenstein in some ways when he comes back from the dead.
Oh no, that was definitely intentional. Like
Right.
Tom McLaughlin, who directed this, he basically wanted to make like a modern day Universal's monster movie.
Right.
Yeah, I thought that was a great idea to have him be brought back like Frankenstein's monster, and the music in that scene is just great. I mean, I know I kind of just went on a bit of a rant about how Tommy should have left well enough alone, but I still, I mean, I get it. He was traumatized, needed closure, but and it is fun to see Jason just rise up and then turn, and then the friend of his, who you thought just ran away, all of a sudden comes back in a futile effort to kill him with a shovel.
But you know what? That was awesome because that shows that he wanted to stop. He was trying to save his friend.
I agree. And then Jason just, he doesn't even feel it. It just breaks, and he just turns around and goes.
I want to point out that this is the first time where Jason's a zombie. In the previous films, there were hints that maybe there was something supernatural going on, but overall he was just like a deformed, mentally challenged man. This time, he's outright a zombie.
Yeah, this is the first one where he becomes an indestructible zombie, and I mean, I'm not particularly a fan of that idea, but I mean, he can still be scary.
I actually like that idea because think about it. He dies in part 4, then he's been buried on the ground for a while, and he comes back a zombie. It actually works out pretty well. It makes sense.
I want to point out some of the continuity issues between this and Part 5. Arguably, you could say this film is ignoring the events of Part 5. However, there are references to how Tommy Jarvis was in a psychiatric hospital. So, in a way, I feel like it is referencing Part 5, but it's doing it in such a way where if you didn't like Part 5, you don't have to watch that one in order to get this one. I mean, I've always assumed that the ending of Part 5 was just a dream sequence. Apparently, there's a novelization of this movie that actually does bridge the gap between Part 5 and this one a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that at the end of Part 5, that was meant to be, he really is going to take up the mantle, and then they just decide to ignore that when people demanded Jason back.
Yeah.
So.
But what do you think of Tom Matthews as Tommy Jarvis? He definitely plays the character much differently than John Shepard did, but Tom Matthews, I think, is great as Tommy Jarvis in this movie.
Yeah, I think so, too. I mean, it's different, the John Shepard in the previous one, he was playing it like, he really was crazy, whereas the Tommy in this movie, he seems a lot more mentally stable. He does get over, excited and over, paranoid. I mean, rightfully so after Jason returns, but yeah, he's definitely not on the verge of becoming a raving lunatic like the previous incarnation was.
Yeah. And the thing is, I do like to think that maybe Part 5 is still in continuity with this, because it's like, I felt so bad for Tommy Jarvis in the previous film that's like, okay, I want to see him, get better, but, that's debatable whether this is actually in continuity with Part 5, but, I mean, arguably would probably make more sense if it wasn't, because of how differently Tommy Jarvis is in this one.
I mean, maybe we could consider maybe the things in Part 5 did happen, and maybe he didn't go through with, killing, what's her name at the end.
Apparently, that is actually explained in the novelization, but I've never read the novelization,
maybe,
so I don't know.
He was institutionalized, maybe he did get better. I mean, that's possible.
I do want to point out, some of the other characters in the movie. I do like the character of Megan. I think she's a really good character, and I actually really like the other characters, too. This time, though, even though this one is outright a horror comedy, this time the characters really do feel more... To me, they felt like this is the one where the characters felt the most realistic. These are, genuinely good people who you don't want to see get killed.
Yeah, I think I agree with that to an extent. And you know what character I also liked? The sheriff.
I love the sheriff.
Yeah,
and here's the thing, his character comes off like a dick, but it's actually, I completely understand why he thinks Tommy is the killer and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and not only that, but he also, I guess, is under pressure to really kind of keep the peace in Forest Green after, they renamed it to kind of distance itself from all the
I
horror.
actually want to point out, I think that's a really interesting idea, how they rename the town and they're trying to forget about Jason. And I almost think that maybe Freddy versus Jason ripped that idea off a little bit for that movie, obviously with Freddy Krueger this time.
Although
But
they kept the town name Springwood.
yeah.
I feel like part 6 is okay. I mean, I wish they brought back the other guy who played Tommy. I mean, not that this guy wasn't really bad. I think I like what's his name who played Tom
In part 5?
Yeah, part 5.
In part 5, he was played by John Shepard.
I think John Shepard was a better Tommy. That's just my opinion. For some reason, I just like John Shepard more as Tommy Jarvis more than this guy did. Especially how, like, in part 5, you really like felt like the sympathy of the story. You just had the look on his face and the expression about how like he really like is so traumatized. What happened in part 4?
I don't remember the line exactly, but I remember, when Tommy first busts through the doors, he just pisses him off so much that he's like, if you piss me off again, I will redecorate this office with your brains. I love that line.
You in showbiz, kid? Because you sure know how to make an entrance.
That's another good one. Yeah, and I believe the character's name was Sheriff Mike Garris.
Yeah.
Which is just too perfect.
But part 6, I think, is easily one of the best of the franchise. It might even be the best of the franchise. And this also has the best soundtrack of the entire series. Like, all the usage of Alice Cooper songs is great in the movie.
Yes, I love Alice Cooper.
Yeah, and I also love the scene where Jason kills all those people, playing the paintball war. It was just...
And, like, you have that one, like, really sexist guy going, "Dumb broad! She tricked me! She should have stayed in the kitchen where she belongs!" Yeah. And I love how, like, he throws his face into a tree and then there's a smiley face.
Blood makes it, like, colorful.
Like, this one is definitely a comedy, and once again, I think this one is definitely not just a spoof on the whole franchise, but also a spoof on... It's a spoof on the slasher genre in general, I think. I do want to point out that in the novelization of this movie, apparently Jason's father actually does show up in the novelization, and apparently Jason's father... It was actually supposed to be like a major character in this originally, but I guess they cut it out or something.
Yeah, I've heard bits of that before. I mean, I think they've been trying to get Jason's father to be character in various of the movies. They actually recently were trying to reboot Friday the 13th again, and his father was going to be a major character, but then, of course, that reboot fell through.
All right. Any closing thoughts on part 6?
I always wonder, like, why, not just like in this film, but any of the future Friday films, why they never bought the father in the film. Because why not? I mean, because we saw the mother, why not his father?
John, that's not even remotely what I asked you. I asked you any closing thoughts on this.
All right. Closing thought. 6 is okay, but probably not my favorite of the series. That's about it.
It's definitely a good one. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's definitely up there.
Wait till the next one.
I do want to point out that something I forgot to mention is that the director of this movie, Tom McLaughlin, also directed one of my favorite Stephen King adaptations, Sometimes They Come Back. Here is Chris's review of Friday the 13th, Part 6.
This is my personal favorite one. And there's like so many great things that work about it. Like, obviously Tommy's kind of come out of the whole mental stupor and everything, and he's really trying to like bring himself back up, but there's also the awkward fact that he's the reason Jason is back in this one. And there's a lot of really cool sort of undercurrents to it. Like, it is self-aware at certain points, like the scene where the dude from Welcome Back, Kotter is like, he looks like right into the camera and he goes, "People got a strange idea of entertainment." That's like a really great self-aware moment. And also, it's got this weird kind of feminist undercurrent, especially with like the character of Meg, who's really well written, and you really are rooting for her. Like, by the time you get to know her. And I think this is when he kills the people who are paintballing. There's a scene where like she jumps down and she's like, "This needs a woman's touch," and she takes them both out. Like, yeah, it's. I think this is like probably one of the few openly feminist Friday the 13th movies. So that's significant. And on top of that, it's just really fun, honestly, to watch. Really cool kills. The self-awareness adds a great another level to it. And for that, it's definitely my personal favorite.
Now let's move on to Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood, which is probably my second favorite of the series next to Part 6. This one, now, I've heard that this one was actually originally going to be a Freddy vs. Jason movie, but apparently Paramount and New Line Cinema could not agree on things, so instead of doing a Freddy vs. Jason movie, they decided basically Jason versus Carrie, only instead of Carrie White, we get the character of Tina Shepard, who is honestly my second favorite protagonist of the series behind Tommy.
Yeah, this was, as you said, definitely meant to be Freddy versus Jason, but of course, Paramount and New Line just could not stop butting heads over, rights and all that.
I'm not gonna lie, a Freddy vs. Jason movie around this time probably would have been better than the Freddy vs. Jason
I
movie
totally
we
agree.
we
I
actually
agree, too.
got.
Yeah, to have those two in a movie at that time when both these series were at their peak would have been spectacular. It's such a shame that it had to take as long as it did. But they still wanted to, keep moving forward in the supernatural direction they were going, so they put a telekinetic teenager in there.
The movie is also directed by John Carl Buechler, who also directed the movie Troll, and he's also a special effects artist. I believe he did do some effects work for the Nightmare on Elm Street films. He might have done some work for Evil Dead 2, but I'm not sure. But John, what do you think of Part 7?
It's my favorite of the series. Oh my god, I think it's like the best like Friday film because I love Kane Hodder as Jason. I like Lars Barker as Tina. She's like one of my favorite characters of the series because she's like a character that you like really like feel sympathy for because like she accidentally murdered her father even though she didn't mean to do it, but because she was a little girl and also because her father was abusive to her mother and that kind of like drove her to kill her father.
Yeah, I also love Kane Hodder as Jason. He definitely is very committed to the role. He really, like when Jason's like breathing, for example, it's so heavy and so menacing. I think that's like one of the nice touches he adds. And he's just such a fan of the character himself, and he really loves doing it. And of course he's, as I've said about other people, very loyal to the fans. Very nice guy to meet.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, you can just tell he has a blast doing it.
I do want to point out that Jason's look in the movie, this is my favorite that the character has ever looked. Just like, he's like zombie Jason from Part 6, but like that Jason on steroids, pretty much.
Yeah, they really bulked him up for this one.
And I liked, there was an interesting bit of continuity with the makeup too, because like, if you noticed in the scenes at the end where he doesn't have the mask on, there are like these slice marks in his skull, which from Part 4, I was like, okay, that's really interesting. They really were paying attention to continuity when they were doing his makeup. And even like his mask is missing a piece from when the propeller on the boat hit his mask at the end of Part 6.
Yeah, I like those touches, and back to Kane Hodder. I read that he got the job on this movie because on one of the director's previous movies, he was willing to put a whole thing of worms in his mouth, to film the scene. So the director saw that he was that dedicated and wanted him for Jason, and he got it.
And I also like some of the other characters in the movie. I mean, they're not as good as Tina, but I do think the other characters are pretty decent. Although I do want to point out the character of Dr. Cruz, who I think is easily... I think he's the true villain of this movie.
Yeah, he's definitely a good secondary antagonist. He's just such a scumbag, and, you can totally tell almost right from the beginning that he's really just out for himself. I mean, you really just hope that he gets what's coming to him.
And, like, the way he's just exploiting Tina's powers in the movie, like, you really want to see this guy get his comeuppance. And one thing I really like about this movie is... the premise is ridiculous, yet it takes itself so seriously, and it works. Like, this one, like, has a lot of really, like, with the character of Tina, there's some really, like, good characterization in this, and it almost plays out almost like a drama in a way, but it works. Like, you would think that would be really ridiculous. Somehow it takes the ridiculous, but makes it kind of believable in this one, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, the plot is pretty ridiculous. It's Jason going up against Carrie White ripoff, Tina, as you said, is a very likable character. You kind of feel bad for what she's going through. Her mother also, who just wants the best for her, and unfortunately put her faith in the wrong person to do that, So yeah, I like those characters.
I do want to point out the timeline issue of this one, because this one is, they don't even tell you how long after part 6 this is supposed to take place, because when you see like Tina as a little girl in the beginning, already Jason was at the bottom of that lake for some time. So arguably this one is set maybe in the 90s. Like, it's definitely set in the future.
I was on reading IMDb. It said at first the opening is 91, but then 2001 it takes place years later when she's a teenager.
Okay. I mean, granted, they already, even prior to this, the series never had the best, like, timeline continuity, because already part 2 was supposed to take place 5 years after part 1, and then, like, by the time you get to part 5, that takes place 5 or 6 years after part 4, so it's like, arguably, like, by the time you get the Freddy versus Jason, you're in the 2020s by that point.
Yeah, trying to figure out all the continuity stuff just jumbles my mind,
It's
boggles
exhausting.
my mind, I mean, it's just...
One day I actually do want to try to make a grid and actually map out when each of these films take place. Because arguably I would say the first 8 Friday the 13th movies, while not having great continuity, there's still something there. There's still some kind of through line or some kind of... There is a continuity, it's just at this point it gets a little screwed. But one bit of continuity or retconning that really annoyed me was they changed the name of the lake back to Crystal Lake again.
Yeah, it's like, well, what the hell happened to Forest Green? Why would they want to change it back to Crystal Lake? Were they trying to erase Jason from their history?
Yeah, my guess is that, okay, maybe the mayor of the town or somebody was like, okay, maybe it's not working out, let's just call it Crystal Lake again. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, they didn't even give any kind of explanation whatsoever. They just chose to ignore it, like they ignore a lot of other things.
I don't suppose there's no like comic book or graphic novel to that to explain. Like, probably not.
Yeah.
I didn't think so.
But yeah, part 7 I think is a great one. I highly recommend it for people who haven't seen it. Here's Chris's review of Friday the 13th Part 7.
Now, this one's kind of a shot in the dark, because they're like, okay, well, we'll have Jason fight a girl who's basically kinetic, psychokinetic. And it's fun to watch, admittedly, because she's just like bashing stuff into his head and all this. And she's very tortured after accidentally killing her father and everything. So it's definitely different compared to the other ones. And I feel like a lot of people probably hate it because it's such a shot in the dark. But I enjoy it personally. And obviously the design on Jason in this one is insane. Because like Beekler, when he takes his mask off, or it gets ripped off, I think, he's got like exposed skull and he's got these really fucked up teeth. There was a lot of work that went into the makeup in this one. And it's so cool to look at in that whole final sequence where she's fighting him in the house. So I like this one a lot.
Now let's move on to Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, which I have to be honest, of the Friday the 13th movies that were put out by Paramount, this is definitely my least favorite, and I would say it's probably the worst of the Paramount era of Friday the 13th, but I still enjoy this one for the most part. This is the one that I would truly call a guilty pleasure. But what do you guys think of Part 8?
Yeah, it's definitely not one of the best of movies, and I think that's in large part due to the fact that, to promote this movie, they really emphasized that Jason was going to be in New York City, and when the movie finally came out, he's only in New York City for the last 20 minutes. It was such a ripoff.
And not even that, it's like when they actually had the scenes that take place in New York City, they didn't even shoot in New York City. They shot in, it was Vancouver, right?
Yes.
They
Canada.
didn't shoot in the city? Because I could have sworn they said in documentaries that...
No, they shot in Times Square, but
Yeah.
Most of like the alleyway scenes were actually shot in Vancouver,
Oh, that's
actually.
just terrible.
It was, because like New York is like one of those expensive places to shoot a film. They shot it in Canada because of that.
Yeah.
I mean, they really pissed a lot of people off that way.
And the thing is, like, for some reason that never bothered me despite the title, because when I first saw this movie, I just knew it was Friday the 13th Part 8. I didn't even, because I first saw it on TV, so I didn't even catch the whole title, so, like, I was like, okay, this is, I guess this is set on a cruise ship. I guess that's what it should have been called, Jason Takes a Cruise. But, I mean, like, I feel like there were a lot of missed opportunities with the cruise ship angle because, like, think of all the interesting ways Jason could have killed people on a cruise ship. Could have threw some guy, like, into the propeller or something. Yeah, in the scenes that take place in the ocean, you could have had Jason fighting a shark or something. Like, there were a lot of missed opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say they almost sort of phoned it in, for lack of a better term.
I mean, this one, I think, of the Paramount era of Friday the 13th, I think this one definitely has the most forgettable characters, except for Rennie. I actually do really like the character of Rennie, but besides her, the other characters are pretty forgettable, except her uncle in the movie, who's such a dick.
Yeah, he's just like Dr. Cruz in part 7. I mean, he's really he's a scumbag. I mean, especially when the flashback scene is shown and he pushes her into the water. That's not how you teach a child to swim.
I do want to point out that in this one, the character of Rennie, for some reason, she keeps seeing the ghost of Jason when he was a child, and that's never explained. However, the character of Rennie became a character in the Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash comics, and in those they actually explained that she had psychic powers, kind of like Tina, but that also depends if you count those comics as canon.
Yeah, and also, I've read those comics too, but, you know, the movies are definitely more mainstream than the comics. More people are seeing the movies than the comics, so not a lot of people are going to know that, you know.
Yeah. I feel like that was just added in those comics to try to explain why she was seeing the ghost of Jason as a child. But one thing I liked about it was each time you saw the ghost of Jason as a boy, he keeps getting more and more fucked up every time you see him. It kind of echoed like American Werewolf in London in that sense, where like Dave kept seeing Jack's ghost, and every time Jack's ghost is more and more decayed. I kind of like that here. The only thing that doesn't make sense is how come Jason was a deformed boy. How come he looks normal all of a sudden?
Yeah, you got me there.
I'm out of words for that one.
But, I mean, it's not a great one by any stretch of the imagination, but I have some enjoyment for it. I have some nostalgia for it. Any more of your thoughts on this?
I will admit, it's not the best of the series, but I think the reason why I like it is because I've learned to appreciate it for what it is, because I get it. It wasn't really the director's fault, it was the studio. They didn't want to shoot it in New York because it was expensive, and it would have been interesting to see it most in New York, like maybe like Yankee Stadium, Times Square, not Times Square, Madison Square Garden, and other places where they could have shot in New York for the fun of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, although I do find the scene where one of the students tries to get her uncle in trouble by videotaping him
That kind of freaked me out.
in a compromising position, that part I found amusing.
I'm not freaked out. It was more like a little
She
bit.
tried to
disturbing.
blackmail him. Yeah, that was funny.
Look, Charles, I tried to label all my organs in the correct order. It's like, stop that, young lady. I mean, really? It's like, what? The guy, wow.
Oh my god.
The guy was such a creep, and I do love at the end when they're in Times Square, Jason kicks the boombox, and those punks are like, "You are dead meat, scumbag."
Then he lifts the mask up and scares them all away.
Yeah.
I agree. That was one of my favorite parts of the movie. I laugh hysterically at that scene. It's so funny.
Yeah, also about that scene, you would think that Jason would just kill them, but no, he actually takes the time to show off his ugly face.
Hey, it's cool, man.
Away instead of killing them. That's nice of him.
I do want to point out, this one arguably picks up where Part 7 left off, and Jason comes back by a cut underwater cable that the electricity brings him back. So he basically gets brought back the same way that he was in Part 6. But one bit of continuity issue that always bugged me as a kid is when Jason comes out of the lake onto the boat, he's wearing gloves. He was not wearing gloves when he was dragged to the bottom of the lake by Tina's father at the end of... I know, I'm nitpicking this, it's just...
Yeah, and I was going to add on to that, just about the end of Part 7 when Tina brings her father back. Her father's supposed to have been down there, dead for all those years, and I remember when he comes up, he really just has some mud on his face.
Well, I kind of always assumed that was more like the ghost of her father. Like maybe they found her father's body, but like maybe his spirit was still trapped down there. That's my interpretation of that, because otherwise it doesn't make sense when they cut the electrical cable in part 8. How come it didn't also bring Tina's father back? I know. At this point, I don't think they really cared that much about continuity.
Yeah, I mean, wait, but if he's just the ghost, then why would the ghost have the mud on him?
I don't know. Like, I know I'm reaching way deeper than they intended. I almost even doubt that the director even saw part 7. And one thing I like is, like, okay, you saw Jason's mask get destroyed in part 7, so he needs a new mask in this one, and I just love how the boat he climbs up to, the kid happens to conveniently have a hockey mask. That's also has the little cut at the top, just like the cut that Jason had in his hockey mask.
How convenient for him.
Yeah. This is not a good one, but it's a guilty pleasure of mine. I enjoy it.
Yeah.
I always watch it right after part 7. It's fun to watch once in a while, you know.
Here are Chris's thoughts on Friday the 13th, part 8.
Jason Takes Manhattan is one that I honestly, like, I can sit through a bad movie, and I don't know what it is about this one, but I just cannot sit through this movie, like, at all. I remember the first time I tried to sit through it, that was like 30 minutes in, and I was just like, I don't know what it is, but I can't stand this movie. I mean, the idea of putting him in Manhattan is great, especially for me as somebody who loves New York. But obviously the big problem is he spends like maybe 15 minutes in New York by the end of it, and most of it is on the cruise ship. Which they acknowledge. They're like, look, we wanted to do more with it, but it just didn't happen. But yeah, it's just, for me, it's strangely unwatchable. I think it feels very phoned in, especially in comparison to the other ones, which are just like silly slasher films. So it's tough to that's a tough nut to crack for me. I don't know what it is.
Now let's move on to Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, which I guess, kind of like part 4, they wanted to be the final film, even though this one is clearly setting up a Freddy vs. Jason movie. But this is one of the most polarizing films in the series, but I love Jason Goes to Hell. I really enjoy the hell out of this movie, but what do you guys think of Jason Goes to Hell?
I'm not a fan. I really never liked the idea of Jason, just possessing different people. I mean, like, maybe if they did that, they had him possess someone maybe for a little while, like in a movie, but maybe that was just like one thing, not constantly, you know what I'm saying? Not constantly doing it, just jumping from person to person. I mean, I don't mean like just have him possess one person for an entire movie. I just mean like, maybe if they had Jason, killing him, whatever, and maybe they kill him and they think he's dead, but then, like, his spirit possesses some of them. I thought, like, that'd be a good twist, but not the way they did it.
The movie is basically, I don't know if you ever saw the movie The Hidden.
No.
It's basically the plot of The Hidden, only instead of an alien, it's Jason, who, in this movie, Jason is a demon now. Like, my interpretation of it is, like, I know this one kind of acts like the other ones didn't happen, but I know there's like a comic book series that apparently bridges part 8 with this one, and I still like to think of this one being in continuity with the first 8, but my personal interpretation is that after Jason died in part 8, he somehow came back from the dead as a demon. Like, that's my interpretation. I mean, I do want to point out that in the film, you see the Necronomicon implying that this might be in the same universe as the Evil Dead movies. So, I guess, like, they were trying to say that Jason's a Deadite in this one. I mean, but it's, the continuity, this time they really, I don't think, cared that much about continuity, but I still personally like to think that it is somehow in continuity with the first 8, but granted, a lot of that is my own personal headcanon. But I find Jason Goes to Hell to be a really fun movie. For me, this is just so much fun, and I think if it wasn't a Friday the 13th movie, if it was its own thing, it might have went over a little better with other people, but I still have a lot of fun with this movie. I like the characters, particularly Creighton Duke and the character of Stephen Friedman, played by John D. LeMay. I thought those two were great characters in the movie. even though Creighton Duke kind of comes out of nowhere because he wasn't in any of the previous films, honestly, that character I think should have been Tommy Jarvis. I think it would have made more sense if he was like Tommy Jarvis telling these guys how you beat Jason. But John, you were silent, so talk.
This is part 9, right?
Part 9.
Part 9 is not really my favorite because I don't like the idea how, like, you see Jason...
Wrong.
You see Jason for 5 minutes, he explodes up, and then he's like going from people to people like Quantum Leap. I would have liked the idea if they had exploded Jason, maybe Jason would have been resurrected, like maybe like Satan came up, resurrected him, and he comes back killing just like that. Instead you see...
Well, maybe that is what happened. You don't know what happened between this and part 8.
I mean, even though Jason is obviously possessing them, you're just seeing a bunch of random people, doing the killing, and I don't want to see that. I want to see Jason doing it.
I don't know. For me, this one at least tried to do something really different, and I liked it. I liked that this one tried to do something different.
I mean, I can appreciate that fact, but sometimes, not every time you do something different is a success.
Okay, for a lot of people, this wasn't a success, but for me personally, it worked. I mean, I have no real problems with this one. My only issue is that it kind of retcons the series, but besides that, I still find this to be a lot of fun. I know you guys don't like it. I know a lot of people don't like this one, but this has always been one of my personal favorites.
I mean, I guess there are a few good moments. The opening's the scene after they blow up Jason where the doctor goes insane and eats Jason's heart. That was enjoyably disgusting.
It was.
And of course, Kane Hodder's cameo outside of costume was very good.
It was nothing but a big old pussy anyway. John, it wasn't that funny.
Kane's awesome when he talks.
I mean, I still enjoy it. One thing I like is the ending where, like, basically at the end, Jason gets a magic dagger shoved through his heart by his niece in the movie, and because he gets back to his old body, it doesn't really make a lot of sense how that happens, but he gets his old body back, and then Jason's niece shoves the magic dagger through his heart, and he gets dragged to hell by demons, and at the very end of the movie, you see Freddy Krueger's hand come out of the ground and grab Jason's mask, implying that the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise takes place in the same universe as this, which would be confirmed in Freddy vs. Jason, but we'll get to that one. But I've always had a lot of fun with Jason Goes to Hell. I understand why people don't like it, but this has always been one of my personal favorites.
Yeah, I mean, the ending is cool with Freddy the glove dragging the mask down, and I also think it's cool how they got actor John D. LeMay, who was in Friday the 13th, the series, to be in it. That's a nice little touch there. But yeah, this is definitely not one of my favorite entries in the series.
The only time I watch this one, if I'm about to watch Freddy vs. Jason, I'll have a marathon of Nightmare, Friday, and I'll watch this one because it sets up Freddy vs. Jason. That's my only worth watching this one.
Well, it's worth watching for more than that, John.
Nah.
You see, I won't attack Jeremy for his opinion, because he has his opinion, but I'll always attack you for your opinion. Here are Chris's thoughts on Jason Goes to Hell.
This one, I feel, is a lot like 8 and 5. Like, people give it a lot of shit, but, the idea in it was really unique. The idea that, like, he would pass from body to body, and it was an attempt to really try to shake things up and try to do something different with the franchise, because... Like, for example, the opening scene where they just, like, blow Jason to hell. I mean, when you think about it, if they hear that there's this dude stalking a campsite and everybody that goes there dies, it would be inevitable, if you try to add realism to this. So, clearly, like, they had their heads in the game. There are some elements of it that don't really work, but I think it does deserve a lot of credit, deserve more credit than it gets. And I do love the cameo appearance to the Necronomicon in one scene because I'm a diehard Evil Dead fan, so that was a nice shout out for them to do.
Now let's move on to Jason X, the 10th Friday the 13th movie, and this one takes place in the future, so arguably you could say that the events of Freddy vs. Jason happened before this. I was never a fan of this one myself, but I know this one has a huge fan base, and you know what? I get why people like it. I see what they were going for. The movie just never worked for me, but what do you guys think of Jason X?
I mean, it's definitely where the series really just jumped the shark. I mean, Jason in space? Just listen to that. Jason in space. I mean, it makes it just...
I think the series jumped the shark when he went to Manhattan.
Yeah, but at least Manhattan is, like, I mean, you could get Jason in Manhattan. I mean, this is in outer space. I mean, come on, you just lose so much credibility with that.
I think that I don't think the film's taking itself seriously. I think the film knows exactly what it is,
Oh, okay.
and I appreciate it for that. But once again, this one never did it for me. But it's not because it takes place in space. It's just the humor never worked for me. Nothing about this movie really worked.
No,
for
I mean,
me.
I get what you're saying, and I understand that. And I mean, yeah, this definitely, like Part 9, is not one of my favorite entries, but it does have a very good kill scene when Jason first, gets revived, and the doctor working on him, has turned her back, and he just gets up, takes her head, shoves it into the liquid nitrogen, and you see the shot of her face like freezing and screaming, and her scream's like frozen,
Yeah.
she's getting frozen, and he just drags her out roughly, and it smashes her face on the desk, and it just splatters, and all the dried blood. It's a great death scene.
I do want to point out, even though I'm not too big on this one, I actually don't mind when Jason gets mutated and becomes, I know they call him Uber Jason. I actually don't mind that. I thought he actually looked really cool when he becomes basically a cyborg version of Jason.
Yeah, Jason gets an upgrade,
Yeah.
which was, I think, the movie's tagline.
Yeah.
And then there's also that hilarious, I think it's funny, the scene where, they try to trick him in the hologram. And I actually read that Mrs. Voorhees was originally supposed to appear in that hologram, and Jason was supposed to attack her to show just how evil he had become, which would have been great.
So what do you think of Jason X?
I actually kind of not like it as a good movie. I like it as like a bad, like fun, guilty pleasure just to make fun of.
John, you could like it as a good movie. I just said, I get why people like this one. It just doesn't work for me.
I will admit it's not the best thing, but it's definitely like a good attempt of trying to do something new with it, which I thought was pretty cool. Like when he goes to space, it's like basically where Jason is up with Alien or something like that.
I do think that was kind of a missed opportunity. Okay, they could have had Jason actually fight aliens.
Which would have been awesome.
Which, to be fair, there's the holograph sequence where he fights a holograph alien, but that would have been interesting to have him actually legitimately fight an alien.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been interesting to see. Instead of hacking up people, hacking up the aliens, totally. But, another character in the movie I want to mention is, I don't remember her name, but the cyborg, the female cyborg, that they later turn into like a killing machine she guns him down, but then he gets the upgrade and she's like, guys, run. And he knocks her head off,
I do like the scene where that douchebag guy who is leading the whole trip into space goes, "It's okay, guys, he just wanted his machete back."
Yeah,
It was funny.
Well, the thing is, this one, I think, like Part 6, was trying to be a spoof of the franchise. It's just, for me personally, it didn't work, but I get why people like it, because this movie has a pretty large fan base, actually. There are a lot of people who really love this movie. It's just was never really my thing. Mainly it's because the humor doesn't work for me. That whole, I'm sure you guys remember the Daddy Likes It Hard sequence. Never found that to be even remotely funny, where she's fucking around with his nipples. I think you remember.
I don't think I remember that part. I had to watch that
also
again.
remember where when the android I mentioned and one of the male crew members, they're talking about their chances of survival, and she says, our chances of survival are very low, and then he kisses her, and then I don't remember what the number was, but she says, our chances of survival just went up however much percent, and I'm like, oh, that is just such a cheesy, bad line.
I think it was intentionally cheesy. I think they knew exactly what they were making. I do love David Cronenberg's cameo in the movie.
That's a good one.
I didn't remember him having a cameo. I had to watch this
It
again.
happens at the beginning, I think, right?
Yeah.
That actually sounds like a pretty awesome idea.
Because Cronenberg's actually friends with the director of the movie, James Isaac.
Yeah, I think he passed away recently.
James Isaac?
Yeah, a few years ago.
Oh, alright.
Really?
Yeah, unfortunately.
I don't know that.
So, any closing thoughts on Jason X?
I guess, when I watch it here and there, I enjoy it, but yeah, I don't rank it as high as I would the original or part 4.
for those of you who are like Friday fans, I would just like watch it and just have a blast with it. Just enjoy yourself. You don't take it too seriously.
Yeah, I agree with John. It's definitely not to be taken seriously at all.
Yeah, and I'm not a fan, but I get why people like it. But personally, I think Jason Goes to Hell is the better film, but I know a lot of people would disagree with me there. Here are Chris's thoughts on Jason X.
This one's just plain fun, like plain cheesy fun. With especially Uber Jason. I mean, when I was a little kid, I was like, wow, he's gonna have sci-fi upgrades. That's gonna be fun to watch. If you kind of just go into it expecting like good cheesy fun, you get that. Don't take it too seriously. Definitely don't. Well, I mean, you would compare it to the others inevitably. I don't know how it would hold up for you. For me, I mean, it's a sci-fi movie compared to what was initially just like a little kid drowning in a summer camp. So it comes a long way from the original, but I enjoy it personally. It's a lot of fun, and that face smash kill never gets old.
And now let's move on to Freddy vs. Jason, the 11th film in the Friday the 13th franchise. However, this film does arguably pick up where Jason Goes to Hell left off, and you could argue that the events of Jason X happened years and years after this one. But Freddy vs. Jason is also the 8th film in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, 7th if you don't count New Nightmare, because that one wasn't in continuity with the rest of the series. But what I want to do for this is I want to really talk about, because I am planning on doing a Nightmare on Elm Street retrospective, so we'll talk about Freddy vs. Jason again there, but I want to talk about how this one works as a Friday the 13th movie. But what do you guys think of that?
I mean, I love it. I love the movie. I mean, it could be better, but I enjoy it, and it was great to finally see these two slashers icons on the big screen together. And as far as working as a Friday the 13th movie, I mean, I think it does in some ways. You have Jason coming back, motivated by his dead mother. Well, really, Freddy in disguise. Doing what he does best, killing teenagers.
John, what do you think of Freddy vs. Jason?
I enjoy. There's things I do enjoy. There's some things I don't enjoy. It could have been a better film, but I like it personally because I like the idea how you have two big horror characters facing off each other, like who's better than the other, and it's fun. It's a fun movie.
You see, this is one that I both like and hate at the same time. I like it mainly for the premise alone. It's like, okay, Freddy and Jason together in the same movie, that's kind of cool. But the reason I don't care for this one that much is really the characters. I think the characters in this movie are so freaking annoying. Especially, honestly, the lead character. I do not like her at all. The only character in this movie I actually kind of liked was the character of Mark, who knows about Freddy and stuff like that, but he was like the only one I actually gave a shit about.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta agree with you to an extent there. A lot of the characters are really annoying. But yeah, Mark was a good one, and I also liked the character Linderman. I thought he was pretty sympathetic. He was kind of the loser of the bunch who was just trying to, get with a girl, and
He was too much of a loser for me.
Yeah, I couldn't stand Kia. She was so annoying, like constantly.
You're not even scary. You're not even scary.
Yeah, she was like, I couldn't stand her. But I do love, again, as I said, seeing Freddy and Jason share the screen, and Robert Englund is fantastic as always. Jason does get some great kill scenes in this, especially the first one where he stabs the guy while he's sleeping on the bed, and then, closes the bed on him. That's just brutal, and it's fantastic. It's definitely a great first kill of the movie,
For me, it's really the characters that sort of kill this movie for me. Because the older Friday the 13th movies, the older Nightmare on Elm Street movies, they at least had great characters. This one doesn't really have good characters, and I think that's really what kills the film for me.
I wouldn't say all the old ones had great characters.
I've always found them to be great characters, but that's because I've really grown up with these films.
Yeah.
But
I thought the idea to have Freddy manipulate Jason into killing people so that people would believe in him again and he'd gain power. I thought that was a good angle to go by, and of course Jason, he's not going to be reined in. He has no plans to just do Freddy's bidding. So, of course, that would lead to confrontation. That was a good way to do it.
Yeah, but I think this would have worked better if it was done more in the spirit of the older films, like having really likable characters and seeing them get caught up in this situation, not seeing characters who I could care less if they died.
I mean, well, what about Will, who's played by Jason Ritter, son of the late great John Ritter?
You see, I never liked him.
Really?
I was never really that into the character. Yeah, I felt bad for him to a certain extent, but
Yeah, because he was in a mental institution for a while.
yeah, but
wrongly.
he just never they. To me, none of the characters really felt that sympathetic to me. I mean, that's just my opinion. I just never really liked the characters in this one.
Right, and in talking about Freddy vs. Jason, I think we should also mention the big casting controversy that came with it, which was New Line replacing Kane Hodder as Jason with Ken Kersinger.
Which I want to point out, doesn't Ken Kersinger make a brief cameo in Part 8?
He
Yes,
does.
he does. And Kane Hodder, I remember reading in Crystal Lake Memories, he's like, yeah, I want it known that, Ken only, doubled for him, I think, in one scene, and Jason in 2 shots, and you can totally tell in our performances. I honestly have to side with Kane on the whole thing. Freddy vs. Jason was in development so long, and, it was so expected, and he expected to be playing him. He was out there talking about it, possibly promoting it. And, so for them to just up and say, well, we don't want you anymore, yeah, it was a big slap in the face.
Yeah, and for me, what would have made this movie better is if they actually had other characters from the older Friday the 13th movies and the older Nightmare on Elm Street movies come in this one, and then you get to see the characters from the Nightmare on Elm Street movies being shocked that there are other supernatural beings out there besides Freddy, just seeing, and you'll see the characters who survived Jason being shocked that a being like Freddy exists. I think that would have been really cool.
Yeah, I mean Ken Kersinger, he's no Kane Hodder. He's a nice guy, and he's no Kane Hodder, but I think he does an okay job. He's kind of, he's definitely tall and intimidating, and that's actually why he was cast, because he was taller than Kane Hodder. They wanted a stuntman who could tower over Robert Englund.
But I don't get that. There's no point in that.
Yeah,
Ronnie was he wanted to create a David and Goliath kind of story.
But that's stupid.
Well, there's been a lot of debate about whether it really was Ronnie Yu's decision or it was New Line Cinemas. Ronnie Yu has tried to claim, that was not my call to replace Kane, while the studio keeps pointing their fingers at Ronnie. So.
Well, I will say I think Ronnie Yu does a really good job in the movie. Does a good job directing the movie. I do think it's a well-made movie. I just don't like the characters, and the story is kind of dumb, but a lot of the other ones had dumb stories too.
Well,
but
actually,
you can make dumb stuff still work, though.
I think a lot of the scenes are perfectly creepy and eerie, like when Laurie goes into Jason's dream and they're back at Crystal Lake. I think it's great. It looks all sunny and bright, and you see all the campers and the counselors. It's wow, this is it's just like a camp, back to Camp Crystal Lake as a camp instead of and it's just perfectly eerie, and you see all the kids making fun of Jason.
Yeah.
I think that was well done.
Yeah, it has some things I like, and I do like the movie. I just think of all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies and all the Friday the 13th movies, this is definitely, besides Jason X and besides the remake, this is definitely my third least favorite of the whole franchise. And of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, not counting the remake, this is definitely my least favorite Nightmare on Elm Street movie. I did appreciate how you could argue that it's somewhat picking up where Jason Goes to Hell left off, because the movie begins where they're in hell, so arguably it does, but there are still continuity issues even with that.
At this point, continuity is kind of, I think, being thrown out the door, out the window.
To a certain extent, there's still a little bit there, not a lot though.
Yeah, I guess so. And, back to casting, another thing I want to mention is, Pamela Voorhees' role in this movie. She appears Freddy in disguise, but, to tell Jason to go back to Elm Street, and kill them all, Betsy Palmer was asked to reprise her role in this, which I think would have been fantastic, but from what I've read, and also from what she's said, they really didn't offer her a lot of money to do it, and she actually, said, oh, it was just a few stupid lines. You were supposed to kill these teenagers, something like that.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's unfortunate, but if she, felt she wasn't being offered what she was worth, then she had a right to turn it down.
I do want to point out how this is the final film of both franchises, not counting the remakes, and it's a shame that there never was a sequel to this, because I would have liked to have seen them continue it on. Because I honestly, there are directions you could have went with a Freddy vs. Jason sequel that would have been really good. There is the Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash comics, which do act as sequels to this, but that also depends if you count them as canon. And I do like those comics, but I think they get a little too over the top, especially where Freddy commands an army of Deadites to take out Washington. It's like
Yeah, I mean, I was always hoping that they'd release a sequel to Freddy vs. Jason, and it's such a bummer that it never happened, and of course it's never going to happen because so much time has passed, and also, Robert Englund is in his 70s and doesn't want to play Freddy anymore. And yeah, they released the comics, which is great, but it's just not the same as seeing them on screen.
yeah.
I don't mind necessarily the remakes of Friday the 13th and A Nightmare on Elm Street that much, but a sequel to Freddy vs. Jason would have been so much better.
I really would have loved to have seen a sequel to Freddy vs. Jason, especially if they had wanted to do Michael Myers in it, or Ash, or any other big popular horror icons. That would have been awesome.
Well, I think they shouldn't go too overboard with it, because it's like, okay, not all these horror franchises can take place in the same universe, but
True, but I'm a sucker punch for Michael Myers. They want to see him in this universe. They want to see him beat Freddy and Jason. And
well, he won't, because
even if Robert Englund never takes the role again, and even if it can't be a direct sequel to Freddy vs. Jason, maybe a future incarnation of both Freddy and Jason, maybe they can be paired up. You never know.
That'd be actually a good idea.
here's Chris's review of Freddy vs. Jason.
I feel like this is one that me and Christian kind of disagree on. Personally, I loved it. For me as a little kid, this was like my Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. It was, these two huge horror icons who were going to fight, and it was legit, it was canon, it wasn't like a comic book or a novel, it was like a movie that was happening. And they brought back Robert, and a lot of people are pissed that Kane isn't Jason in it. I like Ken, personally. Although I think my favorite Jason, ironically, actually is CJ from Part 6. But Ken does a really good job in this, and he's crazy fucking tall, taller than Kane, so he's almost more qualified in a way. But this one, there's so many great lines. I remember the stoner dude. He's like, dude, that goalie was pissed about something in that, in the cornfield scene. I really think it's fun to watch. And admittedly, it does lean more towards Elm Street, which is something they probably should have worked on. But for that reason, for the reason that it's just the two of them fighting, and it's a lot of fun to watch, I really still do enjoy it even today.
Well, our friend John had to leave, but me and Jeremy are going to finish this off talking about the remake. So what did you think of the 2009 remake? I'm going to admit right now, this is the only Friday the 13th movie I've only seen once, and I saw it back in 2009, never had desire to watch it again.
I like it. It's not perfect, and it's got flaws, but ultimately I think it's far from terrible. And, I also, like you, saw it in the theater when it was first released, and it was the first Friday the 13th movie, and actually only one of the series so far that I was able to see in a theater, because almost all the others came out before my time. So, I do have a big appreciation for it for that fact. I think one thing I do like about it is that, with a lot of the later ones in the series, they really made him this immortal, supernatural, indestructible being. So I kind of liked that they brought it back to, old school with just, him as, he was still scary and big and strong, but, he was still human. You could still fight him, which I think just made him, more, I shouldn't say realistic because this is a Friday the 13th movie, but I just liked that better than just this, immortal hulking zombie, And I think Derek Mears did a good job as Jason.
All All right. My biggest issue is I just think since this is a remake or a reboot, whatever you want to call it, this is a new continuity, a new universe, and I just think they should have done something different. Gone hog wild with it, but they played it way too safe, I think.
Yeah, I mean, to an extent I agree with you there, but one thing I think they did sort of do differently, even though it's only implied, is, in the scene where Clay is looking for his sister and he knocks on that cranky old woman's door, and she answers and says, we all just want to be left alone, and so does he. It sort of implies that, those town folks, they know Jason's up there, and they kind of leave him alone, and then he leaves them alone. So you could almost say it's like Jason has them under his control, which, I mean, like I said, it's only implied, but I think that's a nice touch. It's something new.
Now, here is Chris's thoughts on the Friday the 13th remake.
Personally, I think the reboot nails it. I feel like it was kind of polarized between a lot of people. They didn't really like. There was either people who just didn't think much of it, or people who enjoyed it but also didn't think it was a classic. Personally, I think kind of the best of the franchise is like the first 4, 6, and this one, because this one kind of goes back to the roots, takes a lot of the supernatural out of Jason and just turns him into sort of like a dude living on the land, kind of protecting his territory, like being a hunter. It's a really interesting direction to take Jason in, especially since it's so simple compared to what came before. And I like it a lot for that reason. I really love the characters. This was a really good cast of characters in this one. Getting Jared from Supernatural in it was a really good choice. I'm trying to think of anything else that really stands out to me. The opening is great. That whole, I think it goes on for almost 20 minutes, of them coming to the campsite and everything. That's a fun one. And admittedly, the ending could be better. It's kind of like an ending that happens just because that's what they're expecting people to, want. But it's also at the same time, if you go back to the original, that whole jump scare with Alice in the canoe, it's kind of a callback to that. So I guess it's appropriate, even though it kind of doesn't leave you with much. But yeah, I love the reboot, honestly. I like it a lot.
Any closing thoughts on the franchise overall?
Well, I've always enjoyed watching it. I love the films. They're very enjoyable, and I hope you all have enjoyed hearing my thoughts on them.
And I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast or video. I call it a podcast, even though I'm recording this on my iPhone. But I hope you enjoyed it overall, and catch you all at a later time.